Jesus once again, fourth edition, volume 4, chapter 4, Christmas edition of Finding Jesus, where we are we're in our Knowing Jesus series, and this is different ways we see Jesus in our culture, in our world, the world around us, perhaps in unexpected ways. This is the Christmas edition. We're recording this on Monday afternoon, the 21st. Brad has given us an ironclad promise that this would be posted before Christmas.
Thanks for that.
That's what you heard, right, Kyle?
I did, yeah. I wrote it down, actually. So.
Right. So if you are looking at this before Christmas, go to calvary.church/Christmas for all the info on the Christmas Eve services. The Christmas special is there. All the Advent material is there. There's also an EP, which, I mean, you all know what that is, an EP.
Yeah, what does that stand for?
EP. I think it's
EP, definitely.
I don't know, extended play, extra protein.
Like an M3P.
Yes, exactly. And that's would be like on Spotify and
anywhere you stream music.
Anywhere you stream music, and we would look for the Calvary Collective. Is that right?
Calvary Collaborative.
Calvary Collaborative.
A little harder to say. Close,
right,
though.
I guess that was taken. All right. So, yes, look for that. And we're going to be talking about finding Jesus in Christmas, which I was looking at Twitter. I think it was yesterday, day before. And there was a bunch of tweets there. There was a Muslim who had never celebrated Christmas before. And I think because of kind of his coronavirus situation, he wasn't visiting family and he was there with his roommates or something. I don't exactly remember. But basically, he's like, oh, I'm learning how to celebrate Christmas for the first time. And he had, there's a tweet about the tree and presents. And, basically his feedback was it's way more stressful than any Muslim holiday because all these present calculations and who you have to buy for and all that stuff, they don't have to worry about all of that. It's very present focused, and plus, the lights, you got to go put lights up. Everyone's putting lights on, the pressure for lights. So that was one feedback on Christmas was, the stress of it, the pressure of it. And then, his reflection, the interesting reflection, I think, to the point for us today is that, you don't really need to know very much about Jesus to celebrate Christmas. I mean, most of the, at least like most of the people I'm talking about, they don't really know much about Jesus or any of that. They don't even have to be very religious. It's really kind of a secular thing. That was his honest. He wasn't, this is an observation. That
he had no agenda behind it.
No agenda. He said, I don't know much about Christianity, but you don't need to.
Wow.
And of course, there's a sense in which that's right and obvious that lots of people we know celebrate Christmas don't know very much about Christianity and don't need to. So I just, how does that story hit you? What do you think about that?
I don't think I'm shocked at that. Mm-mm. Just because it's, I don't know, the consumer side of Christmas is so big. And I love Christmas, so we celebrate. We start decorating and stuff pretty early, especially this year with all the being stuck at home for so long. It's like, well, if the kids want to put up the tree, let's just do it. But even in our house, it's easy just to let it be about Christmas and not Jesus at times. So I'm not shocked that he would say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, that story. There's several questions that come to mind. Just hearing that, like, wow, we do spend a lot of money on it. And yeah, it is stressful. And yeah, when we do our budget every year, it's okay, well, let's make sure we have savings for December. And I've never thought about what would this season look like for somebody who doesn't share similar beliefs, as me, but probably it doesn't have to look much different if I'm not intentionally entering into the Christmas story, myself.
Yeah, that's sort of the tragedy of it. Obviously, he was not just from a different religious standpoint, but from a different cultural standpoint. He'd never actually celebrated Christmas from the cultural, even the secular cultural standpoint. So he was learning about the whole thing. And one of his reflections was something that, you don't really have to be religious at all. which on the one hand, we know is true. On the other
Mhm.
hand, it kind of points to the cultural observance of Christmas really doesn't have much of any connection other than probably faint historical connection to actual
Mhm.
Christianity, actual Jesus. I mean, you'll nativity scenes and things like that, but obviously you can, if you drive around and you see the lights and you see the 5,000 inflatable, little motors running everywhere, sucking up electricity.
The
Uh,
massacres during the
the
daytime.
massacres during the daytime, where they all look like somebody went by with a machine gun and just drive by them all,
But
and
they're all smiling
they're
still.
all smiling, dead, uh, died happy. But that you can, yeah, if you transport it in, and in fact, there's an old story, see, an old sort of short story or essay C.S. Lewis wrote, which basically it was this alien coming in, and and watching the humans observe Christmas, and
Mhm.
he was making a slightly different point, but it's the same idea that you can go all the way through Christmas and not find Jesus at all, and you could
Mhm.
be a church going Christian, and kind of miss
Mhm.
Jesus in Christmas. Pretty easy to do, really. Uh, so
The other side of that though is he's there. So like that person maybe had a small sample set of friends and stuff, but I think one of the things about Christmas that surprises me is you do hear Jesus on the radio. There are
yeah,
songs that are sung there, and you
right,
may not be somebody who pays attention to those lyrics, but
right,
it is a unique time in that, yeah, I think you could go through the whole month of December and miss it, but it's there
hmm
Mhm.
if you're
it's there in
looking
a way it's not usually there.
for sure.
I mean, the whole point of the holiday originally was and I hope this is not breaking news for our listeners, is to celebrate the birth of Christ. Um, Christ coming to earth, God with us, Emmanuel. And so, yeah, there's a lot of kind of cultural expressions from 150 years ago that would have been all about. I mean, that would have been
Mhm.
most of the cultural expressions. So, to the extent that those are still around, it is sort of weird to hear, uh, that um, you know some sort of hymn or something on 102.5 that has
Mhm.
pretty traditional Christmas lyrics, and you think, yeah, that's an interesting cultural phenomenon where the people playing it may not
Mhm.
even not believe it, but not even really be kind of aware of it,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, or in like there's modern movies that'll have, Christmas movies with the soundtrack that has songs about Jesus in it. And
Hmm.
Mhm.
I don't know, when I catch them, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of surprised at that,
Yeah,
but it's also
Yeah,
kind of cool.
yeah, there's a normative like, okay, this is part of our cultural telling of what Christmas is. I think there's a book that Tim Keller wrote called Hidden Christmas, and that's kind of his main theme is that throughout the Christmas season, right, the real meaning of Christmas is hidden all around us. And so if you've grown up like the tough part or the risk is that like if you grew up in the story, you still have to do work to find it. But if you've never heard the Christmas story, you actually probably know the story of Christmas. You know the story of Jesus' birth without even really understanding it or even recognizing it. And so there's a unique opportunity for us as believers to one, both intentionally enter into that story, but then also uh, to help tell that story or point out that story to other people. I think that's one of the reasons as a church we try to do all these different things to intentionally remind our congregation, but also to create opportunity for people who've never heard that story before to maybe come and experience it in fresh ways.
mm, hmm.
At least I hope that's why we do all that we we do.
Well, I think that I mean, part of this is the manner in which we experience culture, and the extent to which we do or don't reflect on it at all. That if we're not reflecting uh, intentionally, it would be easy to experience Christmas almost purely culturally,
Mhm.
and by which I don't mean necessarily. I mean, that we can feel like it's about, I got to get this gift or my Christmas list or the lights or the, you know, that can become uh, like most of our Christmas experience is this
Mhm.
season of, I got to remember all these things. I got to, oh no, I got a card from them. Darn, you know, why did those bad people send me a card?
Sorry about
You know,
that.
that, um, that can sort of take over that's kind of what I mean in the sense that we can miss Jesus because we are sort of in the cultural stream and the cultural flow and sort of
Mhm.
forget, what the whole thing's really about.
Somehow that feels like one small example of potentially every day of our lives, though.
I like that.
Not just in relationship to Jesus, but in relationship to each other, to our kids, to my wife. Like
Mm.
it would be without intentionality, without like slowing down and reflecting, and without presence, you could just float through all of this.
Yep. Yeah, and you could, you know, that we experience church transactionally or from a consumer, like, so instead of reflecting on what does it mean for me to be in the church, um, I could experience all sorts of my Christianity through some sort of how does this benefit me mindset.
Mhm.
And that just seems like part of the reason spiritual rhythms are necessary. Otherwise, we don't reflect on stuff,
Right.
right?
Because it's not just that Christmas isn't the only stressful time. Like
No.
life is just
There's
full of
Easter.
there's Easter, there's Halloween and all that
Oh,
candy.
right. Right. So,
Because
4th of July.
that's also Reformation Day, and so it's like a yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I think that's sort of, it does maybe underline if you're not into some sort of spiritual rhythm actively, spiritual habits, you probably aren't reflecting and you're swept up into the world of politics or the world of culture or the world of whatever, which, I mean, politics is good, culture is great, but without reflecting, then we're sort of experiencing it probably just like everyone else is,
Mhm.
right? And I think this is happening to you if you're watching a lot of Hallmark movies,
Our
which I
our
Ooh,
think
our first movie reference.
shots fired.
yeah,
All
wow.
right.
Hallmark
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
Well, Mike,
Yeah.
what do you think? So, okay, you went there. So, why are Hallmark movies so like why are they popular? Like why are they memeable even?
Because we are weak and
Sigh.
lost and depraved people. No, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a
Yeah.
sentimental aspect of us that finds expression in Christmas or,
Mhm.
maybe other times Thanksgiving as well. And it's about family. It's about relationships. Um, and so there's part of the whole Hallmark military industrial complex that's, uh, taking advantage of that and making all these movies. But I just, it's the sentimental slash because I mean, are they romantic? I suppose in some sense, depending on what you mean. But it's not. It's a certain sort of story, certain sort
Mhm.
of because there usually is there's a woman who's the center of the story,
Mhm.
typically who's lost their love or something. Um, or they're too wound up in their career and they're lonely, and then there's some sort of family interaction, some surprising guy,
The man that you never would have expected
right?
who comes and shows a side of himself that nobody else ever sees.
How have I not watched these movies?
Okay,
Well,
so with that though,
just watch one, Kyle. That's all you
there's
need.
a lot of there is a lot of good in these movies, I would assume, right? Like themes that we would love to see in our world, right? There's a
There's a
good ending. There's
simplicity.
a
Yeah,
sentiment.
there's a simplicity. There's a happy ending.
Mhm.
Makes you feel good. There's, um, they're not really for me, but they're not. I mean, I'm not the intended audience, and probably I should be is a little different as well. It probably should be more for me if I was a better person, but um,
We're all thinking it.
but I'm not. And so, yeah, I think that's right. It's a feel good,
Mhm.
and maybe does that juxtapose up against some real loneliness or real alienation from my family, or because there's a lot of non-Hallmark Christmas movies that have to do with family
Mhm.
interactions, family, reunion, family, whatever, broken sibling relationships that, you get thrown,
Mhm.
whatever. I mean, that's a pretty consistent theme as well.
Mhm.
Um, and so it could be, yeah, sort of playing into our sense of, yeah, we all have relationships that could be better, and you'd like over Christmas for them to be better. And so some sort of artistic depiction of that has an appeal, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said too about the predictability, right? Of knowing what to expect when you, I mean, it's kind
Not
of
a lot of
our
tension. Yeah, there's not a lot of tension
no,
watching.
no.
Well,
My mom
what
loves
happened?
these. Yeah, not to throw her under the bus. She really much enjoys them. So
But
I
I mean, I know so she's like, there's a lot of movies that wouldn't be for her. I mean, she would not
absolutely.
like, movies where there isn't a happy end, that's sort of like, ugh,
Oh no,
that was
when she
bad.
reads books, if she is connected to a character, she'll turn to the end and just see if the character's name is mentioned because she doesn't want to, you know, lose a
Right,
character that
Yeah.
she doesn't want to get too invested.
I
right.
kind of relate to that. If there's a really like tense scene in a book, I have to like intentionally cover up the page next to it because my eyes want to jump ahead
Yeah.
to know if tension is resolved or not.
Mm.
Yeah, and so
I have
that's
a hard
really
time watching The Mandalorian because that little guy's just the most adorable guy, and if anything ever happens to him, I just won't be able to handle it.
Yeah, the baby Yoda. That's the
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
yeah, so there's sort of a, things are as they should be element, so Christ comes and to make things right, and so there's some sort of a resonance there. But also I do think, yeah, there's a lot of family gatherings where some of these things probably are they're on our minds,
Mhm.
maybe. Or being alone, for Christmas is on our minds. You want to watch or you feel like you're alone, or so I think that's a lot of the appeal,
Mhm.
not simply because of the meaning of Christmas, but because the cultural force of Christmas we tend to celebrate it as families. We tend to
Mhm.
try to get, you know, and that's another theme of Christmas movies, right? The person caught on their own,
Yeah, it's not just
you know,
Hallmark movies. I mean, that's Christmas movies. I mean, The
Christmas movies in
Grinch,
general.
right? You have this dude who's by himself, and one of the reasons I love the newest version of it with Benedict Cumberbatch is they give a little bit of a backstory to the Grinch's character. Like, why is he in this? I mean, I still wonder, like, okay, he's green? Like, what's up with that? Like,
Right, right.
but he's by himself, and so there's like some of the motives that he
Is he
has in
by himself
stealing.
because he's green? Have you thought about
Maybe.
that?
Maybe. Um, but like some of the motives that he has are explained a little bit as to why he's stealing Christmas because it brings up all of these memories for himself when he was young and didn't have family and
Mhm.
didn't have people around to celebrate. And then you see the power of inclusion, the power of, when little Cindy Lou goes and invites him to join their dinner. Yeah, it's powerful, and I think that's a theme there, Mike. That
Yeah,
you
Mhm.
see family, you see togetherness, you see all of that in Christmas movies.
and that's
Well,
one of
that
the
one's
reasons
that
I like it. Well, go ahead.
that one's just so powerful too because destroys everything,
Yeah.
and pretty much I think everyone extends, at least in the cartoon one, the new one extends grace to him,
Right, right,
where
Uh-huh.
most people would say, "You've done this, we're writing you off."
right,
So, like this little girl and the community
right.
extend an overwhelming amount of grace to him.
Yeah, so it's really a story of grace, and it's a story of more than that's not really what Christmas is about. Christmas isn't about presents and trees and lights and however Dr. Seuss says it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and it's sort of that reinforcing that there's more. There's a real meaning of Christmas, that all this other stuff is a cultural expression of it. But and kind of the inverse of talking about we can have the cultural expression of it and miss the real meaning. They lose the cultural expression of it, as if you will, or they think they do, and they have the real meaning of it. And part of that is grace. And so I do think there's a sense of yeah, if you feel like you're the Grinch, and you sometimes hear people refer to themselves as,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
A
certainly
Grinch or a Scrooge or yeah.
Mhm.
right, and blah, the whole thing, and that part of that might be kind of what you were talking about, that Brad, that they've had bad experiences, that they have broken
Mm-hmm.
relationships. They just don't want to think about Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, not to put too big of a downer on it, but Christmas is a time where, people with mental health or depression or suicidal ideation, it's a really bad time of the year for all of these reasons,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
because all of the lacks they feel in their life are sort of exposed, you
Mm-hmm.
um, and so, I do think there is a Hallmark movie sort of medication to, if you watch this happy story, you won't think about painful things that might be prominent in Christmas. That might be a little bit. I'm not saying that's everyone's, uh,
Mhm.
filter, but I do think there's a need for feel good
Yeah.
cultural stuff this time of year, because some people feel really bad,
Mhm.
like this is
Yeah.
the worst time of year for them, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't, and I think, what does grace look like for them, and how are you gracious? Uh, Maybe you have family members that are in that boat a little bit, and you might think, well, that they made their bed, you know, uh, but that's not what the Whoville people did.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Cindy Lou Who. Um, so that's a very practical way to find Jesus and Christmas, is to look for ways to extend grace, to people. Um, so what do you like cultural about Christmas, religious cultural experience? What resonates with you? What do you look forward to? What what many things, I'm sure, but what do they consist of for you?
For me, there's two things. I love lights. Like I like driving around the neighborhoods and seeing, it's kind of a weird thing, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna just string up a bunch of lights on my house and they're gonna be
Right.
up for like 3 weeks, maybe four. And then I'm gonna take them down. And it's the worst time of the year because it's cold when we put them up and put them down. So it's like doesn't make sense in so many ways. But it's just a lot of fun driving around and getting the kids in the car and seeing the lights, seeing what different people do to decorate. And I'm sure there's some sort of significance in why we string up lights. I haven't done the research to know why, but yeah, I love that. I also like, there's something about once all of the busyness and the preparation of getting, like I tell Mal and I talk about it, like the 26th is like my favorite day of the year because all of the busyness, all of the preparation, all of the spending money, all of the everything is done, and we don't really ever have plans on the 26th
Hmm.
because it's the day after Christmas, and so it's just real low key. We rest, we might watch a couple movies, we might read, we might take a nap. Like there's just something about that to me, I like just always stands out.
Mm. Mm.
Mhm. Yeah, I think mine's similar. I think I love really from like Thanksgiving to New Year, I love all of the family time. I always have. Now having kids, it's like even heightened having a 6 year old and 3 year old and watching them experience Christmas is pretty fantastic. So we do the driving around looking at lights, and our 3 year old at every house that has lights almost says, Christmas decorations, and just screams it. Like he's just so excited to see Christmas decorations. Or putting on the
Awesome.
movies that I grew up with, like the old stop motion Rudolph.
Yeah.
Like, not it's not great, but
Oh
I
Hmm.
no,
still watch
no.
it because it's
Yeah.
nostalgic and it's tradition, and
Right.
I love watching it now as a dad.
Hmm.
Experience watch my kids experience with it.
Hmm.
So hearing them laugh at different stuff and just yeah, and our 3 year old's obsessed with the new Grinch, which I think your little
Oh
guy
yeah.
is too.
Oh
So
yeah.
we've probably watched it, 5 or 6 times easy
Yeah.
in a week or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think, so I grew up in a different time, and I mean, it's not like people didn't have lights out, but it was nothing remotely. In the last 20 years, it's a very American thing. Like once we decide you ought to have Christmas lights, it becomes a competition.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's just very like I'm defeating you. I'm going to take you down.
Very
Cul-de-sac
Clark,
neighbor.
very Clark Griswold.
And then lights weren't enough, and so it's
Right.
okay. What can I put in my yard? You got the blow up inflatables. You got the
Yeah.
garland around the door. Yeah.
Right.
Can I sync it all to music?
Right. Right. It's a bit. Says something about America that not about Christmas at all. But I mean, I grew up. I didn't become a Christian until I was early teenager, and we grew up very rarely going to church. So it was all presents. It was all presents and trees, and um, you put up with family that you didn't really want to, see that much or whatever. It was all that, um, and so I think that I do think that part of me, and part of it is just, I mean, I do think the whole buying presents is funner for some people than others. Um, uh, I think that uh, I like the idea of I like the idea. I mean, people give me presents, that's great, but I'm at a kind of point in my life I don't like need a whole bunch of stuff. It's not like I'm secretly hoping for something. I don't expect a new car with a red bow in the driveway or anything like that.
Yeah, those commercials they're the worst. Yes.
Yeah, it's completely
That will
ridiculous.
never happen to me.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. And it shouldn't. And so, just that there's some sort of appeal to just a simpler, like the Little House on the Prairie stories where, like, literally there's an orange and they'd never seen an orange before.
Mhm.
They're in the middle of nowhere, America in the 18 whatever, and somehow they got a hold of an orange and they put it in the stocking, and that and a stick of candy is their Christmas presents, and they're completely thrilled with it. There's something about that resonates with. I'm sometimes afraid we miss the idea in all of we forget why we're buying presents for people. In all of the buying presents for people, at least I do, in a way. So I don't. I mean, it's not like I grew up in that time. I grew up in sort of the opposite of that time, but there's something about that seems that calls out for a little bit more simplicity, maybe. I don't know. I'm a bit conflicted when it comes to Christmas and all the cultural celebrations of it and so on. Maybe because of how I grew up. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Mike, even just hearing you talk about that, it makes me kind of, think about over the weekend, I was listening to Reliant K's Christmas album that they did years ago. And, there's a song where the line is, right, it's always snowing, but it's never Christmas. And that, that comes from the Narnia, right? It's always winter, but never Christmas. And I do think, though, there is something to be said. That's the hard part. Like, it's easy to just say, okay, the consumerism, the big hubbub, like, of Christmas, the spectacle of it, it's easy to get lost, to lose the meaning of it. But also just I think there's something to be said about the celebration, about having something to look forward to, and there's something that, there's grace that's evident in that. That celebration is good, and whether it's the midst of a winter where it's hard to do anything else or be with people, or something we can at least intentionally be in. Yeah.
Also, I think I am a presents guy. I like getting presents. I like giving presents. I love the thought behind.
I love getting presents.
Yeah, I like. So my wife got me me and my 6-year-old Liam, an early present, and she said, "Come upstairs. There's something on the tree." So of course it's an ornament. I go up and we're looking for it, and it's Abbott and Costello ornament that you press the button and it plays the "Who's on First" bit.
Awesome.
So Christmas means a lot to me because my family was always really into Christmas. My mom was very into Christmas. Me and my mom were very, very tight. I grew up watching Abbott and Costello because of my mom. So then I lost my mom in 2017. So that gift means a whole lot because of that. That's the best comedy bit ever. You can argue with me and you'll lose. But that's one where I got to introduce that to Liam this year. So like he pushed play and we're listening. And I think this ornament, I don't know how old it is, but it's pretty old. There's like 2 on eBay. So she tracked one down and found it. And Liam and I are both just sitting there cracking up at this hilarious bit from this, really old ornament. And I love that and so appreciate that she saw my heart in that gift.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm conflicted. I do think that you don't want to be a Scrooge or Grinch. I think all of the cultural expressions can be great, or they can be empty, and so that's sort of the challenge. How do you find Jesus in all of the places where there's echoes of him, but we can sort of, miss it, right? We can sort of get overwhelmed by the trapping or whatever. And that's certainly my challenge is to remember. It's not necessarily finding Jesus; it's sort of remembering that he's there in Christmas.
We could be more concerned with who ate our whole cheese pizza,
for example.
Sorry, Home Alone. Just trying to work it in there.
That's great. Had to come up at some point.
Right.
Well, and I do think that thinking about like the theme of the incarnation, the Messiah that's going to come. Around Christmas time, we look at the prophecies in Isaiah a lot, and what the people of God would have been feeling or experiencing, waiting for this promised Savior to come, this gift that was going to come to them. And yet they had all these festivals, they had all of these things to remind them of God's goodness and his, he keeps his promises. And yet even in then, the danger is always going to be, anytime there's ritual, is to make the thing about the ritual and not the thing that the ritual is supposed to call us back to.
Right. Yeah, I think we need the ritual, and I think we can lose the meaning in the ritual. Both of those things are true, and so the challenge is to remind ourselves, kind of slow ourselves down, exercise some spiritual rhythm during the time, during a very busy time of year, and so that we can remember who Jesus is, who we are, what the people of God were waiting for 2,000 years ago, and what we're waiting for, and how Christmas plays into that, and then just how do we be gracious and loving to to one another? How can we emulate Cindy Lou Who, the greatest Christmas story of all time? Outside of the Bible.
And Die Hard, right?
And Die Hard, right? Yeah. Is there a redemptive anything? I mean, I guess the bad guy gets caught. I mean, is there a limit of people who die in a movie? Can it not be a Christmas movie after a certain number of deaths?
Hallmark won't play it. We'll tell you that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, to me, that's a bit of a stretch, but one way or the other.
That's good.
All right, should we end it there?
Awesome. I think that's good.
All right, so Calvary.Church/Christmas. Look for the Calvary Collaborative music on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to your stuff, and Christmas Eve services. Have yourself a merry little Christmas.